Chapter 10. A young buck stood on top of a knoll a long distance away. With the steady northern breeze, it seemed like an impossible shot given my limitations with a bow. Despite the odds, the cedar bow in my hand began to seemingly raise itself. I gently brushed curved fingers along the feathers at the end of the ash arrow shaft before mounting the arrow and drawing back the rawhide bowstring. Without hesitation, the arrow was released and zipped through the chilly air, piercing the target with a perfect kill shot through the heart. After gutting the deer, I ceremoniously raised the heart in both hands to the sky for the spirits to see and took a large bite. There was a surge of energy as blood pumped through my veins, bringing a feeling of being indestructible. The carcass suddenly felt light. Lifting carefully, the lifeless body was positioned over broad shoulders that had widened during the preceding months. The trip through the forest over downed trees and narrow openings was challenging, but a steady pace was maintained. Blood streaked my cheeks and arms. Gliding out of the perimeter trees, I entered the familiar clearing containing the village to proudly display the fresh kill for my Wyandotte family. My knees buckled, causing a stumble before becoming frozen in place. Straight ahead, a group of my Indian sisters and brothers stood yelling and shrieking at a terrified young woman. It was Abigail, my Abigail. The group parted and Abigail turned and looked directly into my face. Her initial look of surprise now contorted into a look of terror. Her shoulders slumped in exhaustion, and the look of sadness indicated defeat had been accepted. Her terror-filled expression did not change as she continued to stare at me. She suddenly dropped to her knees and sobbed one simple statement. "I'm too late." I awoke and sat up, reaching to wipe my sweat-covered face. The images had seemed so real that it became necessary to examine my damp fingers to confirm it was sweat and not blood that had been wiped away. Dreams of Abigail were rarely the same, but she visited me often in the sleeping hours. After one of Lone Wolf and my walks toward the end of winter, the fox and Hadawako, Shaking Snow, my new parents, were waiting for our return. Shaking Snow, Lone Wolf's mother, who had willingly accepted me as another son after my arrival months earlier, seemed to be encouraging the fox to speak to me privately about something. We spoke using Indian words. The fox, as with most of the Wyandotte elders, did not waste many words. He usually went right to the heart of a matter. "Do you have happiness in your time with us, Tsii?" I had been given this name after I had spent many days, a few months earlier, determined to make my own canoe after being shown the skill. The name meant roughly maker of canoe. "I am glad to be here." I paused before continuing. "Time here has made me more whole, solid." I used hand signals as I spoke, unable to recall the word for complete. He nodded his agreement before continuing. The fox, like most elders, had a weathered look to his brown skin. His eyes were forever squinting, and it gave him a wise look as if he were always contemplating something. Despite his age, he was still sturdy and strong. He continued, "Does your heart long for your family?" "I long for them," I agreed, and then tried to clarify. "That home has no place for me now, though. Now. I know now they are on a different path, a path I don't wish to follow." "It is good when a man knows his path." He paused for a while to collect his thoughts before he continued. "A great honor has been put on you. A clan member has offered daughters for you to take as a wife. It is good in my eyes and early in my eyes. Hadawako thinks it is not early for a wife." The conversation was not a surprise entirely. Lone Wolf had taken to teasing about a few village girls that seemed to be paying me special attention. Some gifts had also been left at my sleeping place recently. Regrettably, Lone Wolf was not here to give instructions on the proper way to handle this conversation. The last thing I wanted to do was insult a male member of the clan. "It is soon. My heart longs for one left behind," I explained. Many times over the past 6 months in dreams, Abigail Reed was by my side through this experience with the Wyandotte. In dreams, conflict raged over whether she was impressed or repulsed by the fact I had become Tsii of the Wyandotte. The evening by the pond came back to me, the words she had appeared to mouth as I glanced back across the pond in the fading light, the night of my escape from Roxbury. The fox was patiently staring at me. I had drifted off into deep thought, and he had recognized the temporary mental flight. When he was sure my mind was back, he responded, "If your heart change, you tell me." He nodded and walked away, seemingly content with the explanation. That conversation brought many changes for me. As spring approached, most of the previous 3 seasons had been spent with the tribe. The thought of the future started to become a focus of my everyday thoughts. Even in the midst of a man's greatest moments and successes, the devil can plant the seeds of doubt. Or is it just convenient to blame the devil for our own shortcomings and weakness? Was this life supposed to be my destiny? Would the few overrule the many and eventually drive me away? Signs of springtime began to emerge on our daily walks. Plans for a huge festival had been discussed all winter. Every 10th spring, the Wyandotte Bear Clan held a feast for the dead. Days of events had been planned, including feasts, ceremonies, and athletic contests. It seemed like an exciting time. The comments made by some about it having been only 8 years since the last festival should have raised questions in me, but didn't. Understanding and accepting the first part of the festival was difficult at first. The way it had been explained seemed savage, and I had too much respect for my new family and friends to believe it would happen that way. It was shocking. The day the festival started, the whole village walked to the clearing where the dead of the last 10 years had been left. Each family opened the small structures containing the decomposing bodies or bones of their loved ones and removed the remains. We carried these bodies back to the village. Each family then scraped and some even boiled the bones before wrapping the clean bones in cloth. A ceremony was held each night where cloth-wrapped sets of bones were presented by the descendants. The family then told a favorite story about the deceased that the whole clan listened to intently. The days were filled with feasts and athletic contests. One game they played was lacrosse, and another involved a hoop hung from a tree branch. Tribe members competed by throwing spears through the hoop to determine the most consistent and accurate. Teams and individuals competed to gain status within the clan. The morning after the last ceremony, the wrapped bones were all returned to the structures in the clearing. Any Puritan who saw this festival would think these people were savages. Would it have been any different if Native American peoples watched a hanging? The English and these people would never see eye to eye because their cultures were too different. 1 week later, the tribal leaders announced plans to move. After early harvest, in a few months, the tribe would move north and settle near Quebec City, closer to their French allies and trade partners. Tribal leaders feared their Iroquois enemies would continue to disrupt trade and eventually attack the village. Groups would be sent throughout the summer to find a place for a new settlement and prepare the location. My first feelings were anger. This place, these people had become home. The perfection of this life would be destroyed. After a few days dealing with considerable frustration, a strange twist was entered into the troubling situation. The Frenchmen, who wintered with the tribe, were rumored to be heading southwest soon. A difficult decision would need to be made quickly. Was it my destiny to head north and make a life with the Wyandotte in a new faraway land? Was my true path to the south following my original plan to locate and settle in the Virginia colony? I chose to go south. Doubt can be a powerful emotion. Fear of possible rejection, becoming a scapegoat for some imagined offense drove me away. After becoming convinced that reliving the events that had once occurred in Roxbury was a possibility, I chose to leave behind people I had come to care deeply about. Never before had I been faced with saying goodbye to loved ones. Leaving Roxbury had happened so fast there had been no time. Lone Wolf and the 2 young girls who had been giving me the gifts took my leaving the hardest. But after explaining to Lone Wolf my heart believed that my path led south, he accepted with little resistance. Several times Lone Wolf's actions and questions hinted that he might like to go. I had learned in my time that here it was proper to wait to be asked for something rather than impose upon another. He likely would have come if I asked, because I had saved his life. His companionship was not in my long-term plan, and it wasn't clear if leaving the Wyandotte behind was even in my best interest. I never asked him to go. He made it his mission to be by my side through every preparation to leave. These people were used to loss and always took it in stride. In the end, there were many thanks. There were a few tears and some firm embraces, but there was tremendous support for my choice as the right one. There would be lots of time for me to regret the decision to leave later.